panel, Jillian Melcher, Deneen Borelli, and Ron Christie. Deneen, let me start with you. I think obviously it's pretty clear that this was a huge victory for President Trump and the Republican Party, but everyone also agrees it's just temporary. And the circus, I think, leaves just a bad taste in everyone's mouth. What can be done by Republicans over this next 3 weeks to really, really show that they're trying to govern?
I do, but I agree with the point that was made earlier in terms of the continuing resolution, really to get rid of it, because we're going to see ourselves in a situation again. And listen, in the real world, we're held accountable for bringing results to the table where we work, right? If you're not, you're fired. So, why can't our politicians do what's best for the country, do what Americans are, put them in office to do? That is the biggest disappointment, I think.
Yeah, but what will Republicans do you think, to change that?
Well, I think they need to get things done. They need to move forward in terms of putting forth a budget when it's due, which is October 1st of every year, so we're not in a situation year after year. Jillian,
Speaker Ryan said they want to negotiate now in good faith. He talked about DACA, immigration, and military. Those seem like reasonable things to have good faith negotiations about. What could go wrong?
Well, I think the Democrats, in particular with the Dreamers, need to decide whether they want to accomplish something, come to the table and make a deal, or whether they want that as a talking point that they can continue to bludgeon the Trump administration on. I take a kind of cynical view of this. I think that that's pretty tempting. These are a lot of young people with a really dramatic, emotional story, and it's entirely possible that Democrats will sabotage the deal to blame it on Republicans. This might backfire, though.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that. That's the problem. When you kind of trigger those kind of emotions, you don't control the emotions like Dr. Frankenstein's monster, right? It's like all of a sudden, hey, you look at what happened to Nancy Pelosi. There's a chance they could overplay their hand with the very same constituents.
Yeah, I think they overplayed their hand just this last weekend. And another thing I want to point out is this was a very different shutdown than under Obama. And I think that's part of the reason that people were willing to give Republicans credit this time. In good faith, they worked hard to keep a lot of things open where Obama wanted to put the pain on.
It wasn't weaponized.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, and that's something I tell you, Ron, maybe help one of the reasons Chuck Schumer caged, because when Mick Mulvaney brought that up on Friday, it was really telling that, hey, at the briefing, we're not going to do it. We're not going to deliberately hurt Americans to prove a point. We're not going to wield government power as a weapon or to use it, to achieve PR aims when we're hurting fellow Americans. I thought that was brilliant.
It was brilliant. And we saw this in 2013 when, of course, they had more staffers from the National Park Service who were out shutting down the World War II memorial. When you had these flights of these 90-year-old brave patriots who'd come to Washington, and the Democrats were saying, nope, you can't visit your own memorial. Mick Mulvaney and President Trump played this exactly the right way. We're going to find a way to allow people who are coming here to New York to be able to see the Statue of Liberty and all these monuments and these places that people rely on to actually have access to their government. Brilliant move.
I've interviewed enough Republicans to know that the DACA solution, if you will, or final agreement, it's going to come down to path to citizenship, right? They all agree, listen, the parents should not be allowed to stay. How does that work? Well, who do you think in that particular case, will the Freedom Caucus, or who's going to finally say, okay, you can have it your way, but and if they do, what would they take in return? Because I still think DACA is going to be more about Republican infighting than inter-party infighting.
Well, I think it's going to come down to the voters, really pushing for their leaders to do what they should do, especially in regards to DACA. I mean, listen, we have people who came here the right way, Charles. They waited online, they paid money, they hired lawyers, they learned our laws and what they need to do to be good stewards here in our country. People who came here the right way. It is a slap in the face for people to come here illegally to our country, and it's all about rule of law. We're about laws, not men.
What about merit-based immigration? I think Canada has a pretty good system. Why can't we incorporate something like that?
There are elements of Canada's system that I really like, and one of them is allowing people to sponsor refugees, because that gives the opportunity for you to build community, to build that assimilation. If there's one thing in the Canadian system I'd like to see duplicated, that's it.
Well, I also like the idea, Ron, that, there's a part, if you have family here, you get some points for that. If you have an education, you get points for that. If you speak the language, you get points for that. That makes assimilation a lot easier. All right, folks, thank you all very much. Lou Dobbs is next, so keep it right here on Fox Business.
Good evening, everybody. A lot to cover here tonight. The government has reopened. President Trump has broken the Schumer shutdown. And President Trump refused to negotiate with the Dems over the weekend after they shut down the government pushing amnesty for illegal immigrants. And Mr. Trump admonished the Dems for representing the interests of illegal immigrants ahead of the national interests and American citizens, and spent his time talking with Republican legislators, urging them to hold the line throughout. They did. Schumer and the Dems folded. Tonight, more shocking revelations of corruption at the highest levels of the FBI and Justice Department. Someone at the FBI destroying 5 months' worth of text messages between anti-Trump officials Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. Those texts span a critical window between the presidential transition and the launch of Robert Mueller's so-called Russia probe. And now the rancidly corrupt FBI actually telling Congress and the public that those emails were lost because of a, quote, technical glitch. House Judiciary Committee member Congressman Ron DeSantis says FBI Director Wray needs to explain how those texts could have been deleted, and will take up a deep state and the toxic who seem entirely comfortable lying through their teeth to oversight committees and the American public. Congressman DeSantis among our guests here tonight. Also tonight, the Schumer shutdown has ended. President Trump making sure that would be so, making it clear at the same time he would negotiate the status of millions of illegal immigrants, while Chuck Schumer and the Dems held the government hostage. And this morning, Schumer caved. We'll take it up with two of the finest political strategists and great Americans, Ed Rollins and Michael Goodwin, and new warnings that North Korea is now only months away from possessing the ability to carry out a nuclear attack against the United States. CIA Director Mike Pompeo says the North's nuclear weapons program is becoming more powerful, more advanced, more reliable very quickly. We'll discuss how the Trump administration must now respond to Kim Jong-un. Ambassador John Bolton among our guests. Our top story tonight, a stunning deep state cover-up, lawmakers demanding answers from the FBI after the agency claimed it lost 5 months of text messages between anti-Trump officials. Fox News Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge with our report.
Of course, we need a second special counsel to get to the bottom of to get to the bottom of all this and answer the many questions we have.
Congressional Republicans are calling out the FBI after learning 5 months of text messages between two key bureau officials in the Clinton email and Russia investigations are missing. The text messages between FBI agent Peter Strzok and his then mistress, FBI lawyer Lisa Page, range from December 2016, 1 month after President Trump's election, to May, when then FBI Director James Comey was fired and Special Counsel Robert Mueller took over the Russia case. According to this letter from Senator Ron Johnson, who chairs the Senate Governmental Affairs Committee, the FBI blamed a technical problem for the Bureau's failure to capture and preserve the records.
People either need to be terminated or prosecuted, because they may say they've lost these things, but I don't think Verizon or AT&T or any of the other phone companies have lost those records.
The nearly 400 pages of text provided to Congress suggests then Attorney General Loretta Lynch knew the FBI would recommend against prosecution before Hillary Clinton's July 2nd, 2016 FBI interview about mishandling classified information. 4 days after Lynch met with Bill Clinton on an Arizona tarmac where they claimed to discuss grandchildren, and 1 day before Hillary Clinton's FBI interview, on July 1st, 2016, Strzok tells Page, "Timing looks like hell, will appear to be choreographed." Page agreed and later replied, "It's a real profiling courage since she knows no charges will be brought." The texts appear to undercut Comey's July 2016 claim that he acted alone when recommending against criminal charges.
I have not coordinated this statement or reviewed it in any way with the Department of Justice or any other part of the government.
Fox News obtained a statement from Attorney General Jeff Sessions. In it, he confirms that the department's internal watchdog, the Inspector General, is now investigating whether the missing records can be recovered and whether their disappearance was deliberate. Lou?
Catherine, thank you. Catherine Herridge reporting. Joining me now on the latest efforts to make that intelligence memo public, the FBI's failure to preserve those text messages or outright destroy them, and much more. Joining us tonight is Congressman Ron of the deep state, if you will, the permanent government. As in the case of Lois Lerner and the IRS, we have again encountered the glitch, a missing set of emails against all logic, all reason, and all experience. What in the world is going on?
A few things, Lou. One is we need to figure out where the actual devices were that Page and Strzok utilized. There's no reason those shouldn't be produced. We need an answer on that. And even if there was some type of glitch, the idea that these text messages disappear, that is not the way it works with modern technology. I don't buy this explanation. We need more. Think about this, too. If the FBI were investigating any one of your listeners and they said, oh, documents magically deleted or whatever the FBI was looking for magically deleted, do you think for 1 minute that they would be able to get away with that? So similar to the IRS, you can't have a situation in which a powerful government agency gets to live under a lower standard than that which it imposes on the American public. And the final thing, I think, is what a critical time period in this whole investigation. I mean, think about it. You're in the Trump transition to start. That was when that discredited dossier was produced for the first time and published by the news media. What was Strzok and Page talking about the dossier? It was also during Trump's early days in the White House when Michael Flynn was interviewed, when different things involving Comey occurred. Are you telling me that they weren't saying all kinds of stuff in those 50,000 messages? These are anti-Trump agents. And it's not just that they were anti-Trump. We already know from the messages we already saw that that affected what they were doing in their jobs.
Yeah, it is, in point of fact, I mean, it's not as if they had a bias or that they're anti. I mean, they were on an absolute mission to stop Donald Trump if they could, and apparently if they could not, to destroy his presidency. I mean, this is, I don't understand how Christopher Wray, anyone in Congress can accept Christopher Wray walking up and saying they were lost, they were deleted, whatever he has to say, produce them, and he did this with a straight face. Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI.
It's unacceptable. We are not accepting it. This is just the beginning. We are going to get the answers. But also think about the Strzok Page messages that were recently produced in this second batch. Right when Donald Trump defeated Ted Cruz in Indiana, Strzok and Page are texting back saying, oh my gosh, Trump has won the nomination. And what was Strzok's main response to that? Again, he's leading the Hillary investigation as the top FBI agent. He says, well, now the pressure builds to bring the Clinton investigation to a close. How does it follow from that? I mean, that is what the guy's bias was telling him to do. It's really outrageous.
It is outrageous. And the Department of Justice and the FBI, Congressman, have become outrageous in and of themselves. I cannot understand why there would be any other response on the part of Devin Nunes, the head of the committee, the Republican leadership, other than to order in U.S. Marshals into the Justice Department and say, we want all of the records sealed for the top levels of the FBI and the Department of Justice. They're carrying out a campaign not only of denying oversight, their constitutional responsibility, as it is yours to oversee those to that agency and that department. They are absolutely just flaunting law and order and the Constitution, and it is beyond the pale that it can be tolerated. This is not a time for an IG inspector's report. This is time for criminal national security investigations of the two agencies who bear immense responsibility for national security.
Well, I think it is clear that the FBI and the DOJ are not going to be able to investigate themselves adequately.
Right.
And if you do a special counsel, Lou, I think it's imperative that special counsel not just be another swamp dweller. I want somebody outside the swamp who doesn't have any relationships with either of these agencies that could really go in and clean this up. And think about, too, the bias against Donald Trump, I think, is very significant. It's important. But also the mere fact that Strzok and Page, they're having this liaison. They're texting about really sensitive matters. they're opening themselves up to blackmail from our enemies. I mean, that is reckless conduct, even if they weren't politically biased, to be doing that. And somehow they're still working in the Bureau?
And as you tweeted today, you're saying FBI Director Wray needs to provide an explanation. This is, I understand that there are great constraints and hurdles for the Congress to move here quickly with great alacrity. But this has now become an urgent national security crisis for the reasons you've described here tonight, for some of the reasons that I have mentioned. We know now the corruption, there's no question about the corruption. The evidence is already public. We have a 4-page memo that we don't seem to be able, even though every congressman, including yourself, who has read that memo says it is a matter that goes to the heart of the survival of the republic. What in the world, at what point do we have to declare, take charge, get this thing handled, and no more business as usual, even under these grave circumstances?
I've been fighting to make that memo public. I can tell you it is going to happen. I think that there's precautions that are being taken on the Intel Committee, which I understand, to make sure that when that's done, that there's not damage to any sources and methods. And I don't think there will be. I think they'll do that. So that is being vetted. That is going to happen. And the public will get at least that part of the story. There's other parts of the story that are going to come out, too. So we will do that. And in terms of Christopher Wray, he needs to be brought before the Congress under oath, and he's got to answer these questions very soon. We're breaking now after the shutdown ended. The president's going to give his State of the Union. I think shortly after that State of the Union, we need Wray under the Clegg lights, under oath, to answer these questions.
I know that you and I share a great fear that having this many missing emails and communications disappear, that what we're fighting against is also all of us who are concerned for the survival of this country. What we're fighting against is the prospect that a lot of evidence is being destroyed by the very people who should be preserving it. So the issue becomes, the crisis becomes compounded. Congressman, I have to say to you personally, I feel a lot better knowing that you are involved in leading the efforts there. Congressman Ron DeSantis, thank you.
Thanks, Lou.
We're coming right back with much more. Stay with us. President Trump breaks the Schumer shutdown. The Dems agree to reopen the government.
I think if we've learned anything during this process, it's that a strategy to shut down the government over the issue of illegal immigration is something the American people didn't understand.
Who will pay the political price for the Schumer shutdown? That's just one of the issues we take up with Ed Rollins and Michael Goodwin coming up. And new disturbing revelations from the deep state. Someone, somewhere in the FBI, the Justice Department, has destroyed 5 months of text messages between anti-Trump FBI conspirators. We'll discuss the growing calls for a second special counsel. Much more on that straight ahead. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
She calls it like she sees it. From government spending.
That's your money.
Not only is he the head of the powerful Office of Management and Budget, but he's pulling double duty as acting director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And though Mulvaney has only been at the CFPB for 2 months, he's already made significant, even dramatic moves to reform the bureaucratic behemoth. Fox News correspondent Kevin Cork with our report.
As agency shakeups go, it was more earthquake than tremor. Mick Mulvaney, acting director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, so said the headlines, requests no money for the agency. But the headlines also ignored Mulvaney's broader mission, say White House officials, to reshape an agency that's been awash in controversy since its inception in 2011 in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis. For the record, the CFPB had $177 million on hand to begin the fiscal year, but needs only about $145 million to cover its operating expenses for the quarter. That, according to the White House, is why Mulvaney requested no additional money for the second quarter. A major departure from his Obama administration predecessor, who asked for $217 million for the fiscal first quarter of 2018. The belt-tightening, a byproduct of a top-to-bottom review of the agency, about which Mulvaney once famously said,
"It turns up being a joke," and that's what the CFPB really has been, in a sick, sad kind of way.
Not surprisingly, critics view his sudden federal altruism with great skepticism, arguing the former congressman from South Carolina simply opposes the fact that the Bureau's budget comes from the Fed and thus is not subject to congressional appropriation oversight. Mulvaney, for his part, says it simply caused a lack of accountability. That, following a legal battle between Mulvaney and former Assistant Director Leandra English over who could appoint the agency's leadership. President Trump, who the courts decided gets to make that call, said the Bureau was a total disaster, adding that financial institutions have been devastated. Consumer advocates say the CFPB has done right by the American consumer. They point to the billions in debt relief and refunds they've received, often, by the way, at the expense of banks. But financial institutions, on the other hand, have argued that the CFPB is simply too aggressive. And now with Acting Director Mulvaney at the helm, they say the timing is right for a regulatory redo. Lou?
And redo they're doing. Kevin, thanks so much. Be sure to vote in our poll tonight. The question is, did you miss the federal government at all over the 3-day Schumer shutdown? Did you miss them? Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. We'd like to hear from you. Follow me on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like me on Facebook and follow me on Instagram at Lou Dobbs Tonight. On Wall Street, a record-breaking day for stocks. This does sound familiar, doesn't it? The Dow Jones Industrial soaring 143 points, the S&P up 23, the Nasdaq up 72, all closing at record highs. Volume on the big board, 3.4 billion shares. I just have to ask you, how does it feel when you look at your 401k? I mean, just how does that feel? And where are those people who would at all be slightly critical of this president? California taking its anti-Trump crusade to businesses. Democrats are now pushing some companies to turn over some of their tax cut savings to the state of California, introducing a 10% tax on businesses making more than $1 million. Again, always California at the leading edge. It's something to behold. A reminder to listen to my reports 3 times a day, coast to coast, on the Salem Radio Network. Up next, the White House says Dems caved on the government shutdown. Chuck Schumer accepting everything President Trump had offered him 3 days previous.
In regards to the government shutdown, we were pleased to see Senator Schumer accept the deal that President Trump put on the table from the very beginning, which was to responsibly fund the government and debate immigration as a separate issue.
We'll take up the Schumer shutdown. Ed Rollins, Michael Goodwin join me here next. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Illinois Congressman Luis Gutierrez says this, quote, "This shows me that when it comes to immigration, Latinos and their families, Democrats are still not willing to go to the mat to allow people in my community to live in our country legally." You want to diagram that sentence? Joining us now to do so is Ed Rollins, former White House political director under President Ronald Reagan, chairman of the Great America PAC, and New York Post columnist Michael Goodwin, both Fox Business contributors, and great to see you.
Thank you.
Luis Gutierrez, Michael, upset with the president, with Senator Schumer for caving into the president. What did he want?
Yeah, look, I think
except everything.
I think there will be a number of Democrats who will make these arguments and vote against it, because this just confirms the point that they put the Dreamers ahead of everything else.
It's crazy to sit there talking about going to the mat. How much more could Schumer have done? It was a bad, bad idea that Schumer implemented anyway.
He went to the mat. He got knocked on his butt, and this is a big victory for the president, for the country. This was a foolish exercise to go through, and you embarrass your own party, and you don't have any consistency for a 17-day drill here. And at the end of the day, if they want to do more in 17 days, do a DACA, we ought to basically open it up and do a whole amnesty review here, and figure out where we're going to go, and whole immigration, not just amnesty.
And do that in a few weeks?
Hey, why not? What else?
Well, let me explain why not. One, I don't think most people would be brought into the conversation. This time, The American people need to be part of the conversation.
I agree. It should be a long drill.
You sound like one of those Dems. I had to do
you
that.
insulted me a lot. I don't
That's
think
a low
I have said over and over again on this show, DACA is one small element of immigration reform. Yeah. And now that we've gone through the stupid drill, shutting the government down and what have you, let's have the full debate. They may not get it done in 17 days, but start it. And make sure that people understand the amnesty to DACA is just the first step. And make sure the security element is not just authorization, it's appropriation of the money.
My guess is most people are worn out with that debate over and over and over because it's been going on for a very long time. And I think the president has real opportunity here to create rational immigration policy and absolutely commanding border security. And border security has to be the priority. It has to be the priority. He can do great things. One thing, we have to work out the relationship with Mexico. And that's going to require leadership that has never sat in the Oval Office before. He's got a tremendous opportunity. Don't you think?
Well, look, I think the dynamic has changed because of the foolish shutting down of the government over this. The Schumer shutdown, I think, has probably changed the entire country's dynamic on this. I mean, the Republicans, led by the president, got to make an argument about the Democrats, and they were proved correct because Democrats got nothing out of it.
Can you believe they were that dumb?
Yes.
I mean, to take up illegal immigrants. I mean, we knew they preferred illegal immigrants to American citizens, but to make it so blatantly and pitifully obvious, my gosh.
Well, you have to understand with Democrats, all of this stuff is about politics. 15 to 18% of the American electorate is now Hispanic voters, and they basically are making every effort to get that voter for the long term. Yeah. And I think to a certain extent, this needs to be policy, not politics.
Okay. The best for last, and that is, again, the FBI exposing itself as a morally reprehensible and corrupt leadership. And again, with new leadership, every bit as it appears as corrupt as previously. What is this president to do? I'm serious. I think send the U.S. Marshals in, save the evidence in every PC, save the evidence in every device, and by gosh, secure it. And some people are going to have to be held accountable here.
Look, I certainly hope so. I was somewhat heartened today. Well, I've been heartened by how serious now Republicans are to get this memo out.
The Attorney General's office on something that is so grave, so important, and it may be the basis for a true crisis.
My early days in politics were the 18.5 missing minutes of the Nixon tape, and that certainly is totally insignificant compared to what
Does it make you pine for the old days?
It makes me pine for the old days. But first of all, nothing is lost. Everything can be found today, and there's a cloud.
That's what they said about Lois Lerner and the IRS.
Well, if you take bleach bit to it.
There's a cloud out there somewhere, and if they can't find it,
listen to you, fancy pants. The cloud.
I can't find anything anytime.
No,
so why the hell?
I've never found the cloud. But anyway.
I pay for the cloud every month. I don't know what the hell it does, but
it makes money.
Supposedly, there's all my stuff up there somewhere in heaven.
It makes you a lot smarter.
Maybe some readers will send it to you tonight.
Whatever.
You get the last word, Mike.
Well, look, I think this is a true scandal, and what has been going on with the FBI, and when you line it up with all of the issues of the Clinton email investigation during 2016 and the leaking, and now this bias against Trump and the Russia investigation. This is an enormous pot that is toxic. And I commend the members of Congress who are finally trying to figure out what is all there.
And the Republicans on that Intelligence Committee who are moving ahead here, Congressman Ron DeSantis and others, particularly Mark Meadows and Jim Jordan. These are, I mean, thank God we've got some on Capitol Hill who stand up for what this country is all about. As do you, gentlemen, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Michael, thank you.
Ed,
thank you.
Thank you.
We're coming right back. There is much, much more. As a matter of fact, I can't say we're only beginning, but nearly so. Stay with us. We'll be right back. CIA Director Mike Pompeo believes North Korea is just months away from being able to deliver a strike against the U.S. mainland with a nuclear weapon. We take up the rogue regime's threats against the United States with Ambassador John Bolton. And an incredible world first. These two German brothers do what so many dream of, building a bathtub with a very unique feature. You won't be able to find a bathtub like this anywhere else. We guarantee it. We'll show you the amazing invention and video next. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Of being able to strike the U.S. mainland with a nuclear weapon.
North Korea's nuclear weapons program is continuing to expand, advance, become more powerful, more capable, more reliable. Each of those things had been shared with policymakers.
So to be clear, how close is Kim Jong-un to being able to deliver a nuclear attack to the territorial United States?
A handful of months.
A handful of months. The Trump administration has repeatedly said a fully nuclear North Korea is completely unacceptable.
It is time for North Korea to realize that the denuclearization is its only acceptable future.
I cannot imagine a condition under which the United States would accept North Korea as a nuclear power.
We will not allow American cities to be threatened with destruction. We will not be intimidated.
And joining us tonight, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton, now Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, Fox Business contributor. Ambassador, good to have you with us. A handful of months before we're going to face precisely that threat.
Well, Mike Pompeo has made a similar point before. He said a few months, and what it says is that after years of presidents and political leaders, Democrat and Republican, saying it's unacceptable for North Korea to get to this point, they are almost at the point. We have failed, and the do bill has come due, leaving it for Trump to make some pretty hard decisions here.
And making it all the more difficult, and this president has acknowledged this, that the Chinese have not been as energetic as he feels they should have been in supporting us, and that in addition to that, Russia is an ally of North Korea.
Yeah, you're being polite here about China. They've jived us for 25 years. They've said we don't want North Korea to have nuclear weapons, and yet they have done essentially nothing that they have the unique capability to do to stop it. So that's why Trump, when he says it's unacceptable, I take him to mean he will not accept it. And if they are as close as Pompeo says, and I think he's right on target, we've got to make a hard decision about the use of military force. And I think that point's got to be made very clearly to China.
Let's turn to the Justice Department and the FBI. Again, two agents, an agency and a department sworn to preserve the national security, violating law and order and the Constitution. And denying Congress the fulfillment of its responsibility, which is to oversee those two organizations. This is reprehensible. What do you think can be done the most expediently to preserve evidence and to bring people who are in positions of authority to bay to prevent further corruption?
Yeah. Look, I'm an alumnus of the Justice Department. I've worked with the FBI in a variety of different capacities when I was at Justice, when I've been at the State Department. I have enormous admiration for the average FBI agent and their work.
The rank and file, this is not an issue. Yeah. The people who lead the Department of Justice and the FBI are corrupt, they're crooked, and they need to be removed forthwith.
The reputation of both institutions is stained, and the stain is spreading. I think the Attorney General has got to act in an extraordinary fashion. I don't think the new director of the FBI gets how serious this is.
He said with a straight face they've been lost.
Yeah. Look, Richard Nixon got toasted for 18 and a half minutes of lost tapes. Many people have said correctly, if you or a business you were running said, well, we've lost 5 months of emails, you'd be toasted. It's not acceptable. And I just think we need some dramatic leadership. I think somebody's basically got to take control of the FBI
Secure
communications and before more of it is destroyed, because that's what's happening here.
Ambassador John Bolton, always good to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Let me see. Jive and toasted. My lexicon grows.
Diplomatic code words.
Ambassador, we always learn something, and I appreciate it. Ambassador John Bolton. Please roll the video A pair of 20-year-old twins from Germany have created the world's first. This is, as it looks like a bathtub flying, and that's because it is a flying bathtub drone. They've been building the tub contraption since last summer. The German government has allowed the twins to fly it as long as it stays, well, only 100 feet or less above the ground. I think that may be somewhat reassuring. Not entirely. Up next, I have to say that was spectacular. Dems are, well, of course, they've caved on the Schumer shutdown as the president enters his second year. I'll have a few thoughts about it all. My commentary coming up next, and later, more than 50,000 text messages exchanged between anti-Trump FBI agents, 5 months of which are missing. Byron York joins us to take that up next.